It's meant to be college basketball's ultimate experience. Of the nearly 300 big-time schools that began play this season, only 4 have survived to compete in the final games. But the NCAA Final Four is also the zenith of another big-time American experience. Gambling on who will win. Aside from the Super Bowl, police and bookmakers say these upcoming games have become the biggest betting attractions of the year.
Maybe $50 million was bet during all the playoff games, or maybe more, legally.
What about illegally?
There's an awful lot of bookmakers around the country. I really wouldn't have an idea how much is bet, but it's astronomical.
Coaches and NCAA executives say they make every effort to insulate players from the possibility of gambling scandals. So when you've led a team to the Final Four, as did Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski, then shouting instructions to players is not the only thing you have to worry about.
People gamble on Little League games. They gamble on whether it's going to be raining the next day. And so if you're not aware of the fact that it can have an influence on your own team or college basketball, then you're a fool.
But the real money games are being played on telephones and in back rooms where illegal bets are constantly being made. Even college games with relatively little marquee value get lots of action. And police say this NIT final will generate $1 million in illegal bets nationwide. The growth in sports gambling has been phenomenal. Already this year in New York City, there have been more arrests and more raids than in all of 1987.
Arrests that we have made in the last couple of years, the profits and the money involved is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's that big.
It's that big.
Authorities say there's so much gambling because invitations to bet are practically everywhere. It's done at the office where pools are established on who will win every major sporting event. Newspapers run advertisements boasting of success rates in picking games.
Television has made this business what it is today. And I'm specifically talking about the sports service business and the gambling business.
Las Vegas is still the only place in America where you can legally place a sports bet. But with so many fans all over the country watching, taking, and giving odds on the outcome of this weekend's games, police say the number of people breaking the law will run into the millions. Harold Dow, CBS News, New York.
Tomorrow, there is a hearing in Bridgeport, Connecticut for a man suspected of murdering an 8-year-old boy and his mother to prevent them from testifying against him. The case highlights a growing problem in this country as federal and local law officers clash over the protection of witnesses. ABC's John Miller reports.
Nathaniel Gordon was known to everyone in this New Orleans neighborhood as Nat the Barber. Last year, one of his customers was murdered right in front of him.
I was cutting his hair, and this fellow walked in and said, "You jumped on me." Then, bam, I was afraid that he might shoot me.
Gordon identified the gunman and testified at pretrial hearings. But before he could testify at trial, Nat the Barber was murdered himself.
He had to go back to court that Friday, and they come in on him that Thursday afternoon and shot him in the top of the head.
103.3.
Over the last 2 years, New Orleans has achieved some of the largest declines in violent crime in the country. But now in New Orleans, a sign of the times. While police are going after more criminals, criminals are going after witnesses. In the last year, 7 people, all witnesses, have been shot or killed before they could testify. And local officials admit they have a problem, but they don't agree on whose problem it is. The police say prosecutors need to set up a program to protect witnesses.
Many of these witnesses have to be sometimes relocated, and the police department does not have the ability to do that.
But the local district attorney, Harry Connick Sr., blames the state judges for letting violent criminals out on bail before trial, who then target the witnesses.
I don't think the judges seem to understand that you have a bad guy who ought to be in a cage, and they elect to let him out.
Now, federal authorities have offered to take over those cases, and they've offered something the state can't, the Federal Witness Protection Program.
There's no reason why federal law enforcement authorities shouldn't be involved in some of these cases if they can make a difference.
But the local DA says he doesn't want to give up any ground to the feds.
I'm not going to give up my jurisdiction to anybody.
The mayor of New Orleans, Mark Morial, says one group is being forgotten in this battle, the public.
I think we put the turf aside, put the people and public safety first.
Most of the murders involved here resulted from turf wars among drug gangs, and that may be the irony here. If local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies in New Orleans can end this violence, it may have a lot to do with them setting aside their own turf wars. John Miller, ABC News, New Orleans.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at the explosion in the American prison population. There are more Americans behind bars today than at any point in history. A report just released by the Justice Department found 1.8 million Americans are in prison now, double the number 12 years ago. 1 out of every 150 people living in the U.S. is living in jail. These are all staggering figures. ABC's Bob Woodruff takes a look behind the numbers.
On one level, the reason for America's increasing prison population is simple. More go in, fewer come out. Consider Joanne Tucker. She was convicted of helping others grow marijuana and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison.
There's women here that were here when I got here for drug charges, and they're looking 15, 20 years, 18 years.
Largely because of the war on drugs, the U.S. now has 6 times as many inmates as all of Europe. Only Russia imprisons more of its people. Private prisons, which charge a fee to lock up criminals, are doing record business. Their stock is soaring.
We've created a really unprecedented prison system. No democratic society has ever locked up this many people in the name of crime control.
And the system is very expensive. It costs more than $20,000 a year to keep each prisoner locked up.
The increase in America's prison population shows no sign of slowing down. The number of people behind bars in this country grew by more than 76,000 last year. That's enough new inmates to fill Camden Yards Stadium here in Baltimore, and then fill half of it again.
So to make room for all those inmates, prison construction is booming. Every day, the U.S. builds about 200 new cells. At about $50,000 apiece, that's $10 million every day.
We've cut spending for higher education by 18% and increased prisons by 30%. We're definitely taking money from our universities and funding our prisons. There's no question about that.
But crime has come down steadily over the past 7 years, and experts say prisons deserve some of the credit.
They're locking up certain high-rate offenders who, if they were out, would be committing crime. I don't think there's any dispute about that.
There is, however, great dispute about spending so much to lock up so many nonviolent offenders like Joanne Tucker.
They really don't care. They don't care who they lock up or for how long.
In fact, some experts now believe the prison population will keep growing for another 5 to 15 years. The U.S., they say, will soon become the world's most incarcerated nation. Bob Woodruff, ABC News, Washington.
As the prison population increases, it's probably not surprising that prison violence does too. ABC's John Miller has a rather shocking report tonight on who's taking the beatings and who's doling them out.
It was January here at the Nassau County Jail in New York when this man, Thomas Pizzuto, was jailed for traffic violations, a 90-day sentence. A week later, he was dead. His family charges he was killed by guards.
He was beaten on Friday, wasn't taken to the hospital until Monday. So for 2 days, how many different shifts of correction officers just passed him by and didn't help him.
In New Orleans, Asian immigrants awaiting deportation say sheriff's deputies ordered other inmates to beat them.
I'm not the only one that got beat up. I mean, there's many more others.
Rather than the deputy beating the INS detainee directly, they armed the other federal criminal inmates and made a sport of it.
And in California, there are charges that prison guards stage gladiator fights between inmates, complete with wagering. Another practice under scrutiny is the officially sanctioned shooting of inmates to break up fights. In the past 4 years, 32 inmates were wounded and 12 killed. The policy is being changed. 3 examples of the national problem of prison violence, and some of the worst violence is at the hands of guards.
Violence is a language the inmates understand, and it works, and it's efficient, and it's effective in maintaining order.
Even if wardens spend more time finding more sophisticated approaches, changing the basic culture of violence in jail may be difficult.
On the floor, hands behind your head.
Corrections officers make less money, receive less training, and far less scrutiny than police. In New Orleans, deputies are recruited with ads that read, "No experience necessary."
It's the good old boy network, and that's what you have to stop.
Here in New Orleans, and in California, and in New York, local investigations into guard brutality or brutality sanctioned by guards have produced little result. Now in all three places, the cases are being handled by federal authorities. John Miller, ABC News, New Orleans.
And on special segment tonight, drugs and terror in that part of the world where the hostages are being held. How terrorists use profits from a rich drug trade to finance their murderous ways. As NBC's Brian Ross reports now, this drug and terror network is expanding at an alarming rate.
Sunrise over the eastern Mediterranean. And in Larnaca, Cyprus, the overnight ferry from Beirut is making its way into the harbor. With all the trouble in Beirut, this ferry is about the only dependable way left to get out of Lebanon. And on board this morning, almost 700 people, most of them fleeing Lebanon for good. But not these two men, who are regulars on the ferry, professional money couriers, going back and forth all the time. According to police in Cyprus, on each trip from Beirut, these men bring out 6 or 7 very heavy suitcases filled with money, a lot of money, in currencies of all kinds. On this day, the equivalent of $50 million. 50 million. Law enforcement authorities in Cyprus say there is a huge cash flow out of Beirut, and that much of the cash in these suitcases is the profits of one business still thriving in Lebanon, the drug business. What's best known about Lebanon is the years of street fighting, shelling, car bombs, massacres, a country seemingly destroying itself. But there is a part of Lebanon that has gone almost untouched by the war. These are rare pictures of Lebanon's secret drug fields in the Bekaa Valley, opium poppies to make heroin, and the Lebanese cannabis plants, which produce much of the world's hashish and hashish oil. This farmer, a Shiite Muslim, says there is no problem growing hashish here. And this farmer says it doesn't bother him to make money from heroin and hashish, money which law enforcement sources say is used to support Shiite terrorism. There are hundreds of acres here under cultivation by the Shiite and Hezbollah drug organizations. And on the coast of Lebanon, a faction of the Christian militia runs and protects at least 4 loading docks that American law enforcement authorities say have been built to ship heroin and hashish around the world. The Shiites and the Christians are enemies on the streets of Beirut, but not in the wide-open Lebanese drug business. Nobody is able to fight drug smuggling in Beirut. Narcotics agents from all over the world, from the United States, Europe, even Australia, are all here in Cyprus, which is about as close as they can get to Beirut, about 100 miles east of here. And the drug agents say what makes their job even more difficult is that the top drug bosses in Beirut are the very men who control the political factions and the terrorism in Lebanon. Law enforcement sources say the Hezbollah terrorists in the 1985 TWA hijacking financed their operation with a $6 million heroin deal. And just last month in Jacksonville, Florida, this Lebanese man who testified he was part of one of the most powerful families in Lebanon, the Jamal family, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for smuggling more than $1 million worth of hashish oil into Florida from Lebanon.
It seems that drug trafficking is a common denominator for these people.
Mike Pavlik, who runs the American Drug Enforcement Office in Paris, monitors the activities of Lebanese groups involved in narcotics and terrorism, what Pavlik calls narco-terrorism.
That's what we're talking about here, narco-terrorism, the fact of narcotics and the sale of narcotics, the trafficking in narcotics being used to finance various terrorism activities throughout the world. It's obvious money is what is needed. Their biggest export, probably as far as we're concerned, is hashish and heroin.
And now, in the Shuf Mountains in Lebanon, in addition to hashish and heroin, the Lebanese are going into the cocaine business. According to this American law enforcement document, there are cocaine laboratories already operating, and there have been efforts to plant cocoa plants
in fields at Tanarin Fuka in the Mount Lebanon region. This boy, the son of a Shiite farmer, has grown up harvesting opium poppies for heroin and knowing only drugs and war. Intelligence sources say the harvest from this year's drug crops was a good one, and that once again there will be millions in drug profits to buy guns, grenades, and bombs for the militias and terrorists in Lebanon. Brian Ross, NBC News, Larnaca, Cyprus.